Hey guys, welcome back to Animal Encounters. I'm Jackson, and today I'll be going over several cases of people who were mauled after taking selfies with animals. From a wildlife photographer who ignored warnings to a 25-year-old Instagram model struck by a tiger shark during a photo shoot. It was June 23, 2018, a Saturday afternoon at Yellowstone National Park's Lamar Valley, where the Wyoming sun beat down on meadows dotted with herds of American bison. Within hours, the valley's deceptive tranquility would be shattered by the kind of preventable tragedy that park rangers had warned about for decades. Caleb Renslow, a 27-year-old forklift operator from Idaho Falls, would become another statistic in Yellowstone's grim ledger of visitor deaths. Caleb worked at a distribution warehouse, operating heavy machinery in 10-hour shifts, 5 days a week. His co-workers described him as the guy who would take any bet, no matter how stupid, jumping off the loading dock into snow piles, racing forklifts after hours, once even touching a hot exhaust pipe because someone said he wouldn't. This weekend trip to Yellowstone was meant to be a break from routine, a chance to blow off steam with 3 friends from high school who still lived in the area. The group had arrived at the park early that morning, driving through the northern entrance with a cooler full of beer and vague plans to see wildlife. They had already passed several bison near the road, stopping multiple times for photos. By noon, they had parked at a pullout near Lamar Valley, where a large male bison grazed alone in a meadow roughly 80 yards from the wooden boardwalk where other tourists gathered. American bison are North America's largest land mammals, with males weighing up to 2,000 pounds and standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Despite their seemingly docile appearance, they are responsible for more injuries at Yellowstone than any other animal, including bears. Their skulls are reinforced with extra bone to withstand the impact of rutting battles, and their horns can gore with lethal precision. Park guidelines explicitly require visitors to stay at least 25 yards away from bison at all times. One of Caleb's friends, watching the lone bison through the telephoto lens of his camera, remarked that the animal looked calm. Another suggested they get a closer shot. Someone mentioned the 25-yard rule, but Caleb dismissed it, saying he had been closer to bison before without incident. The animal had stopped grazing and was standing rigid, head slightly lowered. As Caleb began walking across the meadow, other visitors on the boardwalk immediately recognized the danger. Several people shouted warnings. A park ranger, who had just arrived in his vehicle at the far end of the parking area, began moving quickly toward the scene while radioing for backup. Caleb's friends called out for him to come back, but he waved them off, laughing. He continued forward, phone raised to record a selfie video, closing the distance to roughly 15 feet from the massive animal. And then, the animal lowered its massive head and charged. The sound was described by witnesses as like thunder, hooves pounding the dry earth in rapid succession. Caleb had perhaps 1 second to register what was happening before the bison's skull, backed by nearly a ton of muscle and bone, struck him at full speed directly in the torso. The impact knocked Caleb to the ground, his body rolling roughly 3 feet before coming to rest on his back. Witnesses said that Caleb let out a startled gasp as he hit the ground before going still. The bison did not continue stomping. Instead, it used its head and shoulders to shove Caleb, nudging and tossing him slightly while keeping him pinned under its chest weight. Each movement bore down with hundreds of pounds of force, enough to crush ribs and severely compromise his thoracic cavity. Witnesses could see Caleb struggling under the immense pressure. The bison then gently pivoted away, lifting its head and trotting roughly 30 yards to a nearby rise, where it resumed its rigid, alert posture. Caleb lay crumpled in the grass, his chest collapsed at an unnatural angle, blood seeping from his nose and mouth. His eyes were half open, but unseeing. One of his friends later told investigators that Caleb never moved significantly or spoke after hitting the ground. The park ranger who had been approaching reached Caleb within 2 minutes of the attack and immediately called for emergency medical response. He did not attempt CPR, recognizing that the massive trauma to the chest made resuscitation impossible. Park medics arrived 7 minutes after the initial call, but Caleb was pronounced dead at the scene. The preliminary assessment noted catastrophic thoracic trauma, with the chest cavity completely compromised, multiple rib fractures with bone fragments driven into both lungs and the heart, and massive internal hemorrhaging. The incident received brief coverage in regional news outlets, with park officials using it to reiterate safety guidelines about wildlife distance. Caleb's 3 friends were interviewed by park law enforcement, but faced no charges, as they had not physically participated in his decision to approach the animal. His family later released a statement asking visitors to respect park rules, though they struggled to reconcile how a moment of bravado had ended in such brutal finality. It was March 5th, 2018, and the Bahamas in early spring has a quality no photograph has ever fully captured. The water shifts from pale glass at the shoreline to aquamarine in the shallows, to something deeper and more serious, where the sandbars drop into tidal channels. Beautiful, clear, and completely indifferent to whoever is standing in it. That gap between appearance and reality was about to matter more than anyone on that sandbar understood. Lily Chen was 22, 2 weeks out of graduation, on a 1-week trip with friends who had been promising themselves this vacation since junior year. She wasn't chasing anything extreme. She had studied fashion design in New York, 4 years built entirely around visual judgment, light, framing, finding the angle that makes an image work. She was good at it. The Bahamas trip was the reward, booked specifically for its visual qualities. The color of that water, the clarity of it, the way morning light moves across a sandbar and turns everything it touches into something worth photographing. She brought a waterproof camera. Of course she did. The tour was a standard shallow water shark encounter package run by a local operator, small boat, isolated sandbar, nurse sharks in knee-deep water. Photogenic, manageable, safe enough to market to tourists who had never been near a shark in their lives. The group feeding session proceeded exactly as advertised. The water was clear, the sharks behaved predictably, and Lily's camera had been running from the moment she stepped off the boat. What nobody in that group understood, and what the operator had never made clear, was what 3 years of repeated feeding sessions at that specific sandbar had done to the surrounding environment. When a feeding operation runs at the same fixed location for years, the local shark population learns. The sandbar becomes associated with food. The presence of a boat, people in the water, activity in the shallows, all of it becomes a conditioned signal. But the animals drawn in aren't only the nurse sharks performing for cameras in knee-deep water. Bull sharks patrol the tidal channels that cut through sandbars like this one, channels that are invisible from the surface, indistinguishable from the shallow water on either side. They are territorial, site-associative, and acutely sensitive to the chemical signals a feeding session produces. 3 years of bait in the water at the same location means 3 years of bull sharks learning that this sandbar is worth investigating. A person standing at the edge of a channel, drop-off in water, that has been a conditioned feeding site is producing stimuli that nothing in that animal's experience has taught it to treat with caution. Before this goes further, you need to understand what bull sharks actually are, because the name suggests something less serious than the reality. Bull sharks are the most dangerous large shark in inshore tropical water, and the reason is not temperament in any simple sense. It is habitat overlap. They are the only species that moves freely between saltwater and freshwater, that hunts actively in knee-deep tidal channels, that tolerates the warm, murky, sandbar-cut shallows where people wade. When other dangerous species stay offshore, bull sharks are already in the channel beneath your feet. They are heavy-bodied, short-snouted, and they hit hard. A bite from a large bull shark to the upper leg is not a warning or an investigation. It is a structural event. The femoral artery runs through the inner thigh, and a bite that reaches it turns the surrounding water into a clock. The operator had been running sessions there for over 3 years. No certification, no safety protocols, no system governing where guests could go once the structured session ended. After the group session finished, most guests returned to the boat. Lily walked the other direction, toward the section where the light was cleaner and the frame was emptier. The channels cut through the sandbar around her, invisible from the surface. The water above them looked exactly like the water everywhere else, clear, shallow, calm. She had no way of knowing they were there. Nobody had told her to look. The strike came from the channel edge without warning. A single bull shark, fast and fully committed, hitting Lily's upper right thigh where the sandbar shelf dropped away. The force of it knocked her sideways into the channel drop-off. The water there was only chest deep on the sandbar side, but the channel itself ran deeper, and the current moving through it was stronger than anything visible from the surface. Witnesses on the sandbar saw her go down and lose her footing. She didn't come back up cleanly. The combination of the bite, the current pulling through the channel, and the blood loss already beginning was more than one person in shock could fight through alone. And the people who might have reached her couldn't get to her in time. The boat wouldn't start. The anchor rope had fouled in the propeller during the feeding session. The group could do nothing except wait for a rescue vessel coming from a distance. By the time it arrived, the tide had moved in. Footprints along the sand were gone. Lily's camera had scattered into the current. What remained on the surface, a few drifting bait buckets, a half-submerged selfie stick, was already heading toward open water. The investigation found what it was always going to find: an operator running commercial shark feeding tours at the same sandbar for over 3 years with no certification, no safety infrastructure, and no protocols for where guests could go once the tour concluded. The operation was closed. Lily walked toward a better angle. That was the whole of it. No recklessness, no boundary pushing, no decision that would have looked wrong to anyone watching her make it. Just a 22-year-old with a good eye and a waterproof camera moving toward the light, stepping into water that looked exactly like all the other water around her, and was not. It was April 18th, 2015, and the late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy of ancient oaks and cabbage palms at Myakka River State Park in Florida as 31-year-old Tommy Valdez walked hand-in-hand with his fiancée Lisa along the park's popular nature trail. Tommy worked as a construction foreman in Tampa and had grown up in Central Florida, where encounters with alligators were routine parts of suburban life. His casual attitude toward the state's apex predators reflected decades of coexistence without incident, creating a confidence that would prove fatal. Lisa had moved to Tampa 6 months earlier for her nursing job, where she had met Tommy through mutual friends. Her Midwestern upbringing had provided no experience with dangerous wildlife, making her completely dependent on Tommy's supposed expertise. The couple had been hiking for 2 hours when they reached a scenic overlook, where the trail curved alongside a narrow canal connecting 2 larger wetland areas. American alligators are apex predators that typically range between 8 and 12 feet in length, with most adults weighing between 400 and 600 pounds. These ambush predators are capable of explosive bursts of speed when launching from water to grab prey along shorelines. Alligators are highly territorial around established basking sites and become especially active during twilight feeding hours. Their bite force can exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch, and they employ a signature death roll technique to drown and dismember prey after securing an initial grip on a limb. Tommy spotted a 10-foot American alligator basking on the opposite bank, its massive body stretched across a sandy area where afternoon sunlight penetrated the forest canopy. He positioned himself approximately 6 feet from the canal's edge while Lisa prepared to take pictures with her phone. Tommy's fatal mistake came when he decided that Lisa's photos didn't adequately capture his bravery around dangerous wildlife. He pulled out his own phone and began descending the muddy bank towards the water's edge, intending to take a selfie that would demonstrate his mastery over Florida's most feared predator. The alligator slid silently into the water with barely a ripple, its powerful tail propelling its massive body beneath the surface as it began its underwater approach. Tommy reached the water's edge and crouched down to frame his selfie, holding his phone at arm's length while the alligator remained visible in the background. The prehistoric predator moved through the murky water with remarkable stealth, its eyes and nostrils remaining just above the surface as it closed the distance. The alligator erupted from the canal with explosive force. The 500-pound reptile surged forward from the waterline in a lateral lunge, its massive jaws opening wide to reveal rows of conical teeth designed for gripping and crushing prey. The alligator's jaws clamped around Tommy's right leg just above the ankle, the crushing pressure-fracturing bone as the teeth penetrated deep into muscle and tissue. tissue. Tommy screamed and fell backward onto the muddy bank, his phone flying from his hand. The alligator maintained its grip on his leg, its powerful neck muscles jerking backward as it began dragging Tommy towards deeper water. Tommy's hands clawed desperately at the muddy bank, his fingers digging into the soft earth, but the slick surface offered no purchase. Lisa's screams pierced the air as she watched the alligator pull Tommy's leg into the water, his body sliding down the bank despite his frantic attempts to resist. The reptile backed steadily into the canal, its powerful tail and legs propelling it toward the center where the water was deep enough to execute its killing technique. Tommy's head went under briefly as the alligator pulled him into chest-deep water, then surfaced again as he gasped for air and continued fighting. The alligator began its death roll, spinning its entire body rapidly in the water while maintaining its crushing grip on Tommy's shattered leg. The rotational force twisted Tommy's body violently, his torso and free leg whipping through the water as the reptile completed full rotation after full rotation. The spinning motion dislocated Tommy's knee and hip, the ligaments and tendons stretching and tearing under the extreme torque. Tommy surfaced briefly between rolls, his mouth open in a silent scream as he gasped for air before being pulled under again. His hands reached desperately toward the bank where Lisa stood screaming, but he was already 15 feet from shore and being dragged deeper with each rotation. Water filled Tommy's lungs as the spinning continued, his struggles becoming weaker as shock set in from the catastrophic injuries to his leg and the repeated submersion. The alligator continued its rotational thrashing for several moments after Tommy's movements ceased, stopping only when the body no longer resisted beneath the water. The violent twisting motion had torn through muscle, ligaments, and tissue. The alligator finally stopped rolling and began dragging what remained of Tommy toward the bottom of the canal, pulling him into deeper water where the dark surface showed only spreading blood and occasional bubbles rising from below. Lisa collapsed on the bank, her screams bringing other hikers running from nearby trails. Park rangers arrived within 8 minutes and immediately secured the area, calling for specialized dive teams equipped to work in alligator-infested waters. The recovery operation began at first light the following morning. Tommy's body was finally located the following afternoon, wedged beneath submerged logs in approximately 10 feet of water. Wildlife officers trapped a 10-foot male alligator near the attack site 2 days after Tommy's body was recovered. Wildlife officers identified the animal based on its size, location, and behavior consistent with the fatal attack. Following standard policy, the alligator was euthanized. State regulations require that any alligator confirmed to be involved in a fatal human attack be removed from the wild due to the ongoing risk to public safety. Tommy's death devastated his family and the Tampa construction community, where he had been well respected for his work ethic and leadership. Lisa returned to Ohio immediately after the funeral, unable to remain in the state where her fiancé had died so tragically. But Tommy's fatal encounter with Florida's apex predator was not the only time someone's desire for the perfect photo would lead them into the territory of North America's most dangerous land predator. It was May 27, 2016, and the water off Oahu North Shore was doing what it does on clear mornings: flat, warm, and impossibly blue. This stretch of Hawaiian coastline is one of the most recognizable in the world, and it sits inside one of the most active tiger shark habitats in the Pacific. Beautiful and dangerous are not separate things out there. They run together in the same water. Eulene Brunt was 27, worked part-time service jobs, and spent most of her energy building ocean travel content online. She had come across a claim that circulates widely in diving communities, that touching a shark on the nose redirects aggression and neutralizes a threat. It sounded clever, simple, the kind of thing that turns a dangerous animal into a challenge instead of what it actually is. The dive that morning was informal. No licensed operator, no professional supervision, just a small offshore group with cameras and shared confidence. When a tiger shark appeared and began circling at mid-distance, Eulene moved ahead of the group to get a cleaner angle while the others stayed behind filming. She descended again as the shark circled through the area, then turned toward one of the cameras behind her. Instead of backing away, she grinned through her regulator and stretched her arm toward the shark's face, wagging 2 fingers inches from its snout like she was teasing a pet for the video. A few divers laughed underwater water and kept recording as the shark continued its pass. Tiger sharks are the second most dangerous shark species to humans. Adults reach 14 feet and over 1,000 pounds. Unlike more selective predators, they investigate almost anything within reach. Their serrated teeth are designed to cut through dense material and bone. They circle, they pivot, and direction changes underwater happen faster than most people can react. As the shark swept past her position, Eulene pushed farther into its path, trying to tap the animal directly on the nose for the camera as it turned. And this is the core problem with the nose touch theory. It assumes a calm, stationary shark already positioned correctly. But this was a large tiger shark moving through open water. The conditions that theory depends on never existed. The shark pivoted abruptly during the pass, its body swinging inward toward her extended arm and exposed shoulder. Her arm shifted directly into the bite path before she could pull away. The jaws closed across her upper arm and shoulder and twisted violently before releasing seconds later. The force snapped her sideways underwater. When she surfaced, the damage was already obvious. Severe trauma across the shoulder joint and heavy arterial bleeding spreading rapidly into the surrounding water. Divers rushed toward her while others screamed for emergency assistance and signaled nearby boats. Portions of the interaction and aftermath had already been captured on underwater cameras. The bite had severed major arteries across the upper body region, and the blood loss in open water progressed too fast to control. By the time emergency responders reached the group from nearby shore teams and support vessels, she had already lost too much blood to survive. She died during transport. Investigators later confirmed fatal blood loss caused by a single close-range tiger shark bite to the upper arm and shoulder area. Local dive operators reiterated no-contact wildlife guidance and warned against unsupervised shark interactions in the area. Some operators temporarily suspended similar excursions afterward, though no broader enforcement changes followed. And I think the hardest part about this story is how casual the decision looked right before everything went wrong. Eulene treated a 14-foot predator like it was part of the joke, teasing it for the camera, as if the animal existed for entertainment instead of being a wild apex predator. Footage circulated widely online afterward because of the rarity of clear underwater recordings, capturing both the interaction and immediate aftermath. It was February 3rd, 2018, and the oppressive afternoon humidity of Ayutthaya hung like a wet blanket over the sprawling elephant park, where the ancient ruins of Thailand's former capital cast long shadows across the tourist platforms. The same concrete stage where Merrick would soon ignore every safety warning and grab the trunk of a 38-year-old bull elephant, triggering a fatal crushing. Merrick was a 41-year-old warehouse logistics coordinator from Brno, Czech Republic. He worked for a mid-sized distribution company, managing inventory systems and coordinating shipments, methodical work that required attention to detail but offered little excitement. His colleagues described him as reliable but restless, someone who talked constantly about traveling but never actually left Europe until this trip. He had chosen Thailand after browsing travel blogs that promised authentic animal experiences, and the Ayutthaya Elephant Park had appeared on multiple recommended lists. His goal was simple: capture photos that would prove to friends and family back home that he had done something genuinely adventurous. He had already complained twice to park staff that morning that the standard photo opportunities looked too staged, too obviously touristic for his taste. Marek's frustration with the controlled nature of the park experience had been building throughout the day. He had paid the premium package fee for close proximity elephant encounters, expecting something more intimate than standing behind painted lines while mahouts positioned the animals for photos. He had seen other tourists posting dramatic shots on social media from similar parks, images where people appeared to be interacting naturally with the elephants rather than posing awkwardly several feet away. His messages to friends that morning expressed disappointment with how regimented everything felt. How the mahouts constantly shouted instructions in broken English, how the barriers made every photo look obviously artificial. The concrete platform sat elevated 3 feet above the ground, surrounded by packed earth where the elephants stood during photo sessions. Asian elephants can weigh up to 11,000 pounds and stand nearly 9 feet tall at the shoulder. Their trunks contain roughly 40,000 muscle units and can lift or exert forces measured in the hundreds of pounds, combining immense strength with fine motor control at the tip. adult male elephants, particularly older bulls, experience periodic hormonal surges associated with must and age-related irritability that make them more aggressive and less tolerant of close human contact. These animals possess excellent memories and can become agitated by sudden movements, loud noises, or attempts to touch sensitive areas like their heads and trunks. The elephant assigned to Merrick's photo session was Chai, a 38-year-old male who had been showing signs of agitation since morning. His mahout had warned the morning tour groups that Chai seemed restless, swaying more than usual and secreting a dark fluid from his temporal glands, a classic indicator of must, and trumpeting softly, behaviors that indicated stress or discomfort. The painted yellow line on the platform marked the safe boundary, approximately 6 feet from where Chai would be positioned. The mahout had explained 3 times in basic English that tourists must not cross the line, must not touch the elephant's head or trunk, and must follow his hand signals immediately. 2 other tourists had already been removed from the platform that afternoon for stepping beyond the boundary, and the mahout had considered ending Chai's sessions early, but had been instructed by management to continue due to the premium bookings. When Merrick's turn came, he positioned himself at the yellow line, but immediately began moving closer, holding his phone extended for a selfie. The mahout shouted for him to step back, pointing emphatically at the painted boundary. Merrick waved him off dismissively, focused on his phone screen, and tried to frame a shot that included both his face and Chai's massive head. Other tourists on the platform called out warnings, but Merrick was absorbed in adjusting his position. He stepped over the yellow line, then moved another 2 feet closer, now directly within Chai's reach. The elephant's ears had begun flapping, a clear sign of agitation, and his trunk was swaying in an irregular pattern that experienced mahouts recognize as a warning behavior. The moment Merrick reached out and grasped Chai's trunk with his left hand, trying to guide it into his selfie frame, the elephant's response was immediate and devastating. Chai recoiled violently, his trunk whipping free from Merrick's grip, then swung forward in a powerful arc that caught Merrick square in the chest. The impact launched Merrick backward off the platform. He landed hard on the packed earth below, the wind knocked out of him, his phone flying into the dirt several feet away. Before Merrick could orient himself or attempt to move, Chai stepped forward off his usual position, placing his massive right forefoot directly onto Merrick's abdomen. The initial contact forced a strangled scream from Merrick's throat, audible to every witness on the platform. The elephant's weight, estimated at over 9,000 pounds, drove down through his torso with overwhelming pressure. His ribcage collapsed beneath the crushing force, the structural integrity of his chest cavity failing completely. Merrick's screaming stopped, replaced by wet, gasping sounds as his punctured lungs struggled to function. Chai maintained the pressure for several seconds, his weight compressing Merrick's torso and pelvis against the hard-packed earth. The crushing force was applied as a defensive response rather than a frenzied attack, driven by agitation and perceived threat. 2 other mahouts rushed forward with long poles, shouting and striking Chai's legs to drive him backward. The elephant responded to their commands, stepping away from Merrick's motionless form. Merrick lay flat on his back, his chest visibly collapsed, breathing in shallow, irregular gasps. The normal structure of his ribcage was destroyed, and his lower body was twisted at unnatural angles, suggesting catastrophic pelvic injury. The tourists on the platform began screaming and crying, several becoming physically ill at the sight. The park supervisor called emergency services immediately, providing precise GPS coordinates and describing the injuries as catastrophic crush trauma. The ambulance navigated rural traffic and narrow roads, arriving at the park 22 minutes later. Paramedics found Merrick unconscious with signs of massive internal injuries and crush trauma affecting the chest and pelvis. They initiated emergency protocols and transported him immediately, but he was pronounced dead en route to the hospital at 3:05 p.m. The attending physician later documented that survival would have been impossible due to irreversible thoracic collapse and extensive organ destruction sustained at the scene. The elephant park removed the concrete platform within a week, but continued operating under modified safety protocols. Chai was relocated to a different section of the facility and restricted from tourist interactions, though park officials maintained that the incident resulted from human error rather than animal aggression. Investigators seized visitor phone footage and park surveillance recordings as part of the inquiry and subsequent civil settlement. Merrick's body was repatriated to the Czech Republic. The investigation revealed that Chai had been involved in 2 previous incidents with tourists, both involving aggressive behavior that had been downplayed in incident reports to avoid regulatory scrutiny. Park management had been aware of his increasing irritability, but continued using him for premium photo sessions due to his impressive size and photogenic appearance. Internal communications showed that staff had repeatedly requested Chai's removal from tourist interactions, but financial considerations took precedence over safety concerns. It was March 15, 2019, in the lush hills surrounding Chiang Mai, Thailand, where dozens of unregulated wildlife sanctuaries operate in the shadows of legitimate conservation efforts. The Tiger Paradise Sanctuary, a small facility nestled between dense jungle and rice paddies, marketed itself as an authentic wildlife experience for adventurous tourists. Unlike accredited zoos, this establishment allowed direct contact with adult tigers for premium fees, capitalizing on visitors' desire for extraordinary social media content. The humid tropical air carried the scent of jasmine and tiger musk, while the distant sounds of motorbikes on rural roads mixed with occasional roars from the enclosures. Amber Whitfield, a 28-year-old social media manager from Sydney, had built a modest following of 4,200 Instagram followers by documenting her Southeast Asian backpacking adventure. Working for a small travel company back home, she understood the power of compelling visual content. Her competitive nature drove her to seek increasingly daring experiences that would set her apart from other travel bloggers. After reading mixed reviews about Tiger Paradise, she specifically chose this sanctuary because it offered the closest contact with tigers available in the region. The facility's promise of private photo sessions with adult Bengal tigers was exactly what she needed for her content strategy. Her previous posts from elephant sanctuaries and snake farms had generated significant engagement, fueling her desire for even more dramatic content. The sanctuary housed 12 tigers in concrete enclosures surrounded by basic chain-link fencing. Warning signs in broken English advised visitors to maintain distance, but enforcement was minimal. Staff members, mostly local workers with little formal training in animal behavior, prioritized customer satisfaction over safety protocols. The facility's main attraction was Raja, a 400-pound male Bengal tiger rescued from illegal captivity as a cub but never properly socialized. His massive orange coat bore the distinctive black stripes that made him particularly photogenic, explaining why tourists specifically requested sessions with him. Bengal tigers are apex predators capable of taking down prey weighing over 1,000 pounds. Their powerful jaws generate bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp canine teeth can reach lengths of 2 inches. Despite their massive size, tigers can accelerate from 0 to 35 miles per hour in just a few strides. Their hunting instincts remain intact even in captivity, triggered by sudden movements, direct eye contact, or prey-like behavior from humans. Even hand-raised tigers retain their predatory programming, making them unpredictable around humans regardless of their apparent docility. Amber's private session with Raja began at 2:30 p.m. in a concrete enclosure measuring roughly 30 by 40 feet. The tiger appeared calm, lying in the shade near the back wall, while Amber maintained the recommended 10-foot distance. As she grew more confident, she gradually moved closer, encouraged by Raja's seemingly docile demeanor. The untrained staff member supervising the session failed to recognize the subtle signs of the tiger's increasing alertness, his ears rotating forward and his tail beginning to twitch. When Amber turned her back to Raja and extended her phone for a selfie, she unknowingly triggered the predator's hunting instincts. The massive tiger exploded into motion with terrifying speed, covering the distance between them in less than 2 seconds. His powerful hind legs propelled him forward in one fluid leap, his front paws extended and claws fully deployed. Raja's jaws clamped down on the back of Amber's neck with surgical precision. His 2-inch canine teeth penetrated between her cervical vertebrae, severing her spinal cord at the C2 level. The crushing force of his bite completely fractured her second cervical vertebra, causing immediate paralysis from the neck down. The tiger's massive jaw pressure compressed her carotid arteries and jugular veins, cutting off blood flow to her brain within seconds. The attack lasted less than 10 seconds. Raja's bite severed Amber's brainstem, causing instant unconsciousness and respiratory failure. Her nervous system shut down immediately, preventing any pain sensation from reaching her brain. The tiger released his grip and stepped back, his predatory instincts satisfied by the successful kill. Amber's body collapsed to the concrete floor, her phone still clutched in her right hand, the intended selfie never captured. Staff members rushed into the enclosure within minutes, but Amber showed no signs of life. Her neck displayed massive trauma from the tiger's bite, with deep puncture wounds marking where the canine teeth had penetrated. A complete severing of her spinal cord had caused immediate death, with no possibility of survival even with immediate medical intervention. Thai authorities launched an investigation into the facility's safety protocols and licensing status. The Tiger Paradise Sanctuary was temporarily closed, pending review of its animal handling procedures. Amber's family released a brief statement requesting privacy while they processed the tragic loss of their adventurous daughter. It was July 18, 2017, when the scorching Australian sun beat down on Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory of Australia, one of the most remote and dangerous wilderness regions in the country. The dry season had transformed the ancient landscape into a harsh, unforgiving environment where every shadow promised relief and every waterway beckoned with false promises of safety. 19-year-old Phoebe Galt had arrived at this remote wilderness with two close friends, their backpacks heavy with camera equipment and dreams of filming the perfect travel footage for their growing online following. Phoebe was no ordinary tourist. As a travel vlogger documenting her journey across northern Australia, she had spent months recording her trip, each video carefully crafted to capture the raw beauty and danger that drew thousands of visitors each year. Her followers expected footage from increasingly daring locations, and this ancient parkland represented the crown jewel of her expedition. The trio followed the marked walking trail to an official viewing platform overlooking a billabong system known to park staff as a high-risk crocodile area, a slow-moving river channel famous for its large population of saltwater crocodiles. Multiple warning signs lined the path in bold red lettering, stating that crocodiles inhabited these waters year-round and that visitors must remain within designated viewing zones at all times. These barriers created a clear boundary between safety and the wild. From the elevated platform, the river appeared deceptively peaceful. The muddy water moved lazily between mangrove-lined banks, its surface occasionally disturbed by gentle ripples that could have been wind or something far more dangerous below. The viewing area provided a good vantage point for photography, but Phoebe wanted something closer, more dramatic than the standard tourist shots. Saltwater crocodiles are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted killing machines that can grow over 15 feet long and weigh more than half a ton. These reptiles possess one of the strongest bite forces of any animal on Earth, capable of crushing bone with a single snap. Their hunting strategy relies on patience and stealth, often remaining motionless at the water's edge or just below the surface while waiting for prey to approach the shoreline. What makes them particularly dangerous is their ability to stay almost completely submerged while watching potential prey. Their eyes, nostrils, and ears sit on top of their heads, allowing them to observe without exposing their bodies. When they attack, they can surge forward with explosive power, launching from the water with terrifying speed in short bursts on land or in water. After several minutes on the platform, Phoebe made the decision that would cost her life. She stepped past the safety barrier and began walking down the sloping riverbank toward the water's edge, leaving the designated viewing area and moving into the restricted shoreline zone. One of her friends hesitated at the barrier and warned her not to go closer, but Phoebe kept moving, and the others followed a few steps behind with the camera equipment. The muddy shoreline was exactly the type of terrain park authorities warned visitors to avoid: soft ground that allowed crocodiles to approach silently. One friend stayed several steps back and urged Phoebe to return to the marked path, but she continued moving closer to the waterline, focused entirely on getting the perfect shot. The afternoon light was ideal for filming, and the calm river behind her looked harmless, Standing only a few feet from the edge, Phoebe turned her back to the water while her friend began recording. The muddy river behind her appeared still, but visibility was poor due to sediment that created perfect camouflage for predators. What she could not see was the massive saltwater crocodile that had been watching the group since they left the safety barrier, lying motionless in the shallows near the muddy bank. The attack came without warning. The crocodile, estimated at over 4.5 meters long, burst forward from the edge of the water, its jaws clamping down on her leg and hip, the enormous bite force knocking her off balance instantly. Instead of spinning immediately, the crocodile dragged her straight toward the water with powerful backward pulls, using its weight and grip to overpower her before she could react. Her friend screamed as the animal hauled her across the muddy bank and into the river. Once in deeper water, the crocodile began a violent death roll, twisting its body to subdue its prey and pull her fully underwater, the natural killing technique used by large crocodiles when resistance stops. The muddy current churned as the animal spun, and within seconds, Phoebe disappeared beneath the surface. Her friends ran toward the bank but stopped at the edge, knowing entering the water could trigger another attack. The river quickly returned to its calm appearance, hiding the struggle that had taken place only moments earlier. The combination of massive trauma and drowning proved fatal within minutes. Other visitors heard the screaming and ran toward the parking area to alert park staff. Rangers, assisted by police, responded quickly, closing the section of river and initiating emergency protocols. Search operations were delayed until rangers determined the crocodile was no longer in the immediate area, allowing recovery teams to approach safely. Personal belongings and remains were recovered downstream several days later. The official cause of death was listed as injuries sustained during a crocodile attack, with drowning contributing to the fatal outcome. The investigation concluded that all safety precautions had been in place and that the incident occurred because the victim crossed the safety barrier and entered a restricted riverbank zone. Her family requested privacy while grieving, and the travel community mourned the loss of a young traveler whose search for the perfect shot led her too close to one of Australia's most dangerous predators. It was June 18, 2017, and the Texas summer heat was already thick by mid-morning. A sprawling wildlife preserve stretched across nearly 3,000 acres just outside Glen Rose, one of those rare places where African animals move freely, while visitors wind through on a single paved drive-through route. Giraffes, rhinos, cheetahs. The only barrier between you and them is a car window and a set of rules you agreed to follow at the gate. Bella Frost was 26 years old, an Instagram model and freelance content creator building an audience. She traveled constantly, picking up media gigs where she could, but the real product was footage, short-form clips of close wildlife encounters, each one pushing slightly further than the last. She believed that the closer she could capture the animal and the more dangerous it looked, the more people would watch. She wasn't entirely wrong about that. At the entry checkpoint, staff ran through the standard briefing. Approved pellets only. Hands inside the vehicle at all times. Do not tease or bait animals with objects or food. Bella set her phone on the dashboard, pointed forward. She left the pellets in the bag. She had a clear plastic soda bottle instead. Giraffes along the route know the routine. They approach vehicles expecting food, long necks dropping toward open windows. They've done it thousands of times. For them, it's nearly automatic. Bella had something else in mind. Giraffes are the tallest land animals on Earth, up to 18 feet tall, weighing as much as 3,000 pounds. Their hooves can generate enough force to kill a lion outright. In proper feeding conditions, interactions stay controlled. But these are not domesticated animals, and when an animal that size has been conditioned to expect something and doesn't receive it, the dynamic shifts fast. As a giraffe approached the open driver's side window, Bella raised the bottle just above its reach. The animal stretched its neck forward. She pulled back. She did it again, leaning a little further out the window each time to keep the giraffe in frame. Other vehicles had already slowed down. A few passengers had their phones out. Even I would be pissed off if someone teased me like that. Bella really went too far this time, let alone an animal that doesn't have a brain like ours. The giraffe stepped in closer, dropping its head directly towards the window, expecting the object to be handed over. Bella raised the bottle one more time. Her upper body was now well past the edge of the door frame. The giraffe thrust its head forward suddenly, a full committed motion with the weight of a 3,000-pound animal behind it. At that range, the speed caught Bella off guard. She jerked backward instinctively, but her center of gravity had already shifted past the door edge. She went over sideways. The back of her skull hit the gravel road hard on impact. The giraffe, startled by the sudden drop, continued forward through the narrow gap between the vehicle and the road shoulder, and one front hoof came down directly across her upper chest and shoulder as it passed. The force behind a giraffe's leg at that body weight is not something you absorb. The compression across her chest and shoulder, combined with the direct skull impact on gravel, produced injuries that were not survivable. The giraffe moved past. Nearby drivers had already stopped. People were shouting. Multiple phones were still recording. Park staff received radio calls from other visitors within minutes. Emergency services confirmed fatal blunt force trauma from the combined head impact and crushing injuries. Investigators noted that Bella had been positioned outside the vehicle boundary and had not used approved feed at any point. Park operators reinforced the checkpoint briefing, though no major changes followed. They pointed back to instructions already clearly posted. This one is hard to set down, not because the giraffe did anything wrong. It did exactly what a giraffe does. Every choice that brought Bella to that moment was made deliberately, in full view of the rules she was breaking. The footage was immediately held by authorities. Bella Frost's story is a reminder of what happens when the distance between spectator and subject disappears, and the animal decides what comes next. It was September 14th, 2016, and the crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine through the backcountry of Glacier National Park as 25-year-old Cole Henderson followed a familiar trail deeper into the wilderness he had called home for most of his life. The million-acre park, straddling the Continental Divide along the Montana-Canada border, represented one of the last intact ecosystems in the lower 48 states, where grizzly bears roamed freely through pristine alpine meadows and dense forest valleys. Cole worked as a ranch hand for one of the largest cattle operations in northwestern Montana, where his reputation for tracking lost livestock through bear country had earned him respect among cowboys who understood the risks of working in grizzly habitat. His childhood had been spent learning to read animal sign and weather patterns from his father and grandfather, both of whom had successfully ranched in the glacier ecosystem for decades without serious wildlife incidents. This family history had given Cole a confidence that bordered on recklessness. His girlfriend Sarah lived in Austin, Texas, and their long-distance relationship relied heavily on Cole's frequent photos and videos documenting his adventures in what he called the real Montana. Cole took pride in showing Sarah experiences that her urban lifestyle could never provide, often venturing into dangerous situations to capture dramatic images. The backcountry trail Cole was following led through prime grizzly habitat, where late-season berry patches concentrated the park's bear population during their crucial pre-hibernation feeding period. Cole carried bear spray and understood basic safety protocols, but his numerous peaceful encounters with bears had created a false sense of security. Grizzly bears are the apex predators of the North American wilderness, with adult males weighing between 400 and 650 pounds and possessing strength that allows them to kill elk and moose with single blows from their massive paws. These intelligent omnivores possess strong spatial memory and rapidly assess perceived threats within their territory, making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Grizzlies become defensive when humans approach too closely, and violations of their personal space can trigger attacks that escalate to fatal violence within seconds. Cole spotted a massive grizzly bear digging for glacier lily bulbs in an alpine meadow approximately 40 yards from the trail. The 550-pound male was focused on his feeding, using his powerful claws to excavate the nutritious roots that would help him build the fat reserves necessary for winter hibernation. Cole immediately recognized this as the perfect opportunity to capture dramatic wildlife footage. Cole pulled out his phone and began approaching the feeding bear. moving slowly and quietly through the meadow grass while keeping the camera focused on his target. He managed to close the distance to 25 yards before stopping to frame his selfie, positioning himself so that the massive grizzly would be clearly visible behind him. The bear had stopped feeding and was now watching Cole's approach with focused attention. The grizzly rose onto its hind legs to get a better view of this potential threat, its massive frame towering 8 feet above the meadow as it assessed the human who had violated its space. The grizzly dropped back to all fours and immediately charged across the 25 yards, separating it from Cole, its powerful legs covering the distance in seconds. Cole looked up from his phone just as the bear burst from the meadow grass, the charge already too close and too fast for him to deploy the bear spray clipped to his belt. The grizzly struck Cole with overwhelming force, its powerful forepaws knocking him to the ground as crushing blows landed across his head and upper body. The impact of the bear's jaws and forelimbs caused severe trauma to Cole's skull and neck, the blunt force and penetrating injuries rendering him unconscious within seconds. After several seconds of violent contact, the bear disengaged, stepping back as Cole lay motionless in the grass. Cole died from the catastrophic head and neck injuries sustained during the attack. Wildlife officials determined that Cole had violated fundamental bear safety protocols by approaching too closely and triggering the animal's defensive response. The grizzly was identified through witness accounts and physical evidence, and park policy dictated that bears exhibiting normal defensive behavior would not be destroyed. Enhanced warning signs were installed throughout the backcountry, and mandatory bear safety courses were implemented. Cole's death devastated his family and the tight-knit ranching community where he had been respected for his wilderness skills. Sarah was traumatized by the loss and became an advocate for wildlife safety education. However, Cole's tragic encounter with a grizzly bear was not the only time someone's misplaced confidence in reading animal behavior would prove deadly. In Florida, a veterinary student's academic knowledge would fail her when confronted with the lightning-fast reflexes of one of nature's most efficient predators. It was August 22, 2021, in the remote backcountry of Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, where vast wilderness stretches across 2.2 million acres of untamed landscape. The Pelican Valley area serves as prime grizzly bear habitat during late summer berry season. Rolling hills covered in huckleberry bushes provide essential food sources for bears preparing for winter hibernation. The morning air carried the crisp scent of pine and distant elk bugles. Darren Cole, a 42-year-old IT consultant from Portland, had recently separated from his wife and sought solace in solo wilderness adventures. His weekend hiking trips had evolved into increasingly ambitious backcountry expeditions, fueled by an overconfident personality developed through years of incident-free outdoor experiences. Darren's stubborn nature and belief in his wilderness skills had made him dismissive of park safety guidelines, particularly regarding wildlife encounters. He had ventured into Pelican Valley specifically because of recent grizzly sightings, hoping to photograph bears for his modest social media following of 3,800 outdoor enthusiasts. His expensive camera equipment and determination to capture unique wildlife images had driven him deeper into restricted areas than most visitors dared to explore. The late August timing coincided with peak bear activity, as grizzlies frantically consumed thousands of calories daily to prepare for winter denning. Female bears with cubs became especially protective during this critical feeding period, viewing any potential threat as a danger to their offspring's survival. Park rangers had posted warnings about increased bear activity throughout the backcountry, but Darren's confidence led him to ignore these advisories. Grizzly bears are North America's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 400 pounds and males reaching 800 pounds. Their powerful limbs can propel them at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour, while their 4-inch claws and massive jaw muscles make them capable of crushing bones with ease. A grizzly's bite force reaches 1,200 pounds per square inch, easily capable of crushing a human skull. Despite their bulk, grizzlies possess surprising agility and can navigate steep terrain with remarkable ease. Mother bears with cubs display extreme protective behavior, attacking perceived threats with devastating ferocity. At 2:15 p.m., Darren spotted a female grizzly with 2 yearling cubs foraging in a berry-rich meadow approximately 200 yards away. The 350-pound sow appeared focused on feeding, methodically stripping berries from bushes while her cubs played nearby. Darren immediately began photographing from his initial distance, but the lighting conditions failed to meet his perfectionist standards. He gradually moved closer, stopping periodically to capture images while the bear family continued feeding. The sow began displaying stress signals as Darren approached within 100 yards, huffing sounds, jaw popping, and swaying her massive head from side to side. These warning behaviors escalated when he reached 75 yards, but Darren misinterpreted them as normal bear behavior rather than clear threat displays. His movement pattern inadvertently positioned him between the mother and one of her cubs, triggering her protective instincts. When Darren advanced to within 50 yards for better photographic angles, the situation reached a critical threshold. One yearling cub wandered behind Darren's position, effectively trapping the human between the protective mother and her offspring. The sow's demeanor changed instantly from cautious awareness to explosive aggression. The grizzly charged at full speed, covering the 50-yard distance in less than 4 seconds. Her massive paws thundered against the ground as she closed the gap with terrifying velocity. Darren fumbled desperately for his bear spray, but the canister remained clipped to his backpack as the 350-pound predator struck him with tremendous force. The sow's initial blow came from her massive front paws, her 4-inch claws raking across Darren's chest and face. The impact knocked him backward onto the ground, opening deep gashes from his collarbone to his sternum. Blood immediately began flowing from the parallel claw marks as the bear's razor-sharp talons tore through muscle and tissue. Her second strike targeted his head, her powerful jaws clamping down on his skull with crushing force. The grizzly's bite generated over 1,200 pounds per square inch of pressure, fracturing Darren's skull and causing immediate brain trauma. Her canine teeth, each over an inch long, punctured through his scalp and penetrated the bone beneath. She shook him violently, the motion causing additional fractures to his cervical vertebrae and severe damage to his brain stem. The mauling continued for approximately 90 seconds as the protective mother ensured the threat to her cubs was completely eliminated. She struck repeatedly with her claws, opening his abdomen and exposing internal organs, while her powerful jaws delivered crushing bites to his torso and limbs. When Darren's movements ceased, the sow delivered one final bite to his neck before retreating to gather her cubs. Darren died from massive head trauma and blood loss within minutes of the attack's conclusion. The combination of skull fractures, brain damage, and severe hemorrhaging from multiple wounds proved immediately fatal. His body was discovered 4 hours later by park rangers. Yellowstone National Park officials launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing Darren's hiking permits and circumstances leading to the encounter. It was September 3rd, 2016, when the late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the sprawling bushveld of Kruger National Park, one of South Africa's most famous game reserves. The dry winter air carried the scent of dust and dried grass as temperatures began to cool, drawing predators out from their midday resting spots and into the open. 32-year-old Maryanne Miller sat in the passenger seat of a rented sedan, camera in hand, scanning the roadside vegetation for movement as her boyfriend navigated the narrow tar road deeper into the reserve. Maryanne had built a modest but growing audience as a travel vlogger, documenting wildlife encounters and scenic destinations across southern Africa. This self-drive safari was meant to be the centerpiece of her latest series, a multi-day journey through Kruger National Park, one of the continent's most iconic wildlife destinations. The couple had entered the park that morning, collecting their entry permit along with a printed set of rules that made one instruction unmistakably clear: visitors must remain inside their vehicles at all times unless within designated rest camps or fenced picnic areas. Signs reinforcing this rule appeared at regular intervals along the road, some featuring illustrations of lions and leopards to emphasize the ever-present danger lurking just beyond the window glass. The reserve is home to Africa's full complement of apex predators, and every year, thousands of visitors safely observe them by following one simple principle: the vehicle is the barrier. By late afternoon, the couple had already logged several successful sightings. Then, along a quiet stretch of road, bordered by thick golden grass, they spotted what every visitor hopes to see. Several lions lay partially concealed in the vegetation just meters from the road, their tawny coats blending seamlessly with the dry surroundings. Other vehicles had already slowed nearby, windows cracked open just enough for camera lenses. African lions are the continent's largest predators, with males weighing up to around 420 pounds and females averaging closer to 260, built from pure muscle and instinct. Despite their reputation for laziness during the heat of the day, lions are ambush hunters capable of explosive acceleration, reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour in short bursts. What makes lions especially dangerous to humans on foot is their predatory response to movement. A person standing upright outside a vehicle no longer appears as part of the car's silhouette. To a lion, that figure instantly registers as something separate, something vulnerable, something worth investigating. Maryanne's boyfriend stopped the car so she could film through the open window. The footage from that angle was decent, but partially obstructed by the tall grass. After a few moments, Maryanne opened the passenger door and stepped out onto the road, camera raised, moving several steps away from the vehicle to get a clearer line of sight toward the resting pride. That single decision sealed her fate. The moment her feet touched the ground, the dynamic changed. One of the closer lions lifted its head, ears rotating forward, eyes locked onto the figure now standing in the open. A second lion, previously hidden in the thick grass on the opposite side, lowered its body and began advancing in a crouched position, using the vegetation as cover to close the gap without being detected. The distance between the concealed lion and Maryanne was short. The charge came fast and silent, the animal covering the ground in seconds before she could react. She turned back toward the car, but the lion was already on her. It struck her from behind with tremendous force, knocking her to the ground beside the vehicle. The lion's claws raked across her back and shoulders, tearing through clothing and skin in a single motion. Its jaws bit into the neck and shoulder area, causing severe trauma and heavy bleeding. The attack lasted only seconds, but caused catastrophic injuries. Deep lacerations from the claws tore muscle across her upper body, while the bite caused severe trauma to the neck and major blood vessels, leading to rapid blood loss. She lost consciousness quickly from the injuries. Her boyfriend remained inside the vehicle and laid on the horn repeatedly, the blaring sound eventually causing the lion to release and step back into the grass. Other drivers kept their distance, but also used their horns, trying to scare the animal away without leaving their vehicles. Maryanne lay motionless on the ground, beside the open passenger door. By the time the nearest visitors reached a rest camp and alerted staff, rangers were already being dispatched to the scene. They confirmed she had died from the injuries sustained during the attack. The combination of severe blood loss and trauma had been fatal before medical help could arrive. The investigation determined that all park safety protocols had been properly communicated and that the attack was a direct result of the victim leaving the vehicle in an active predator zone. Officials reiterated that even when lions appear calm and stationary, they remain fully aware of their surroundings and can transition from rest to attack in seconds. It was November 2nd, 2018, and the Churchill coastline was deep into the freeze cycle. Wind cutting across the Hudson Bay, snow packed hard across the tundra. Churchill is known as the polar bear capital of the world for a reason. Every autumn, bears migrate toward the coast as the bay begins to freeze, concentrating along the shoreline in higher numbers than anywhere else on Earth. Lestécrand was 33, worked in general administrative roles, and traveled seasonally for wildlife photography content. This trip was guided and structured, with pre-departure briefings that laid out the rules clearly before anyone stepped outside. During a photography stop along the shoreline, the group spread out slightly for different camera angles, the way groups tend to do. Low, snow-covered ridges ran along sections of the coastline, partially breaking sightlines between members of the party. Lesta spotted something near one of the ridges, a polar bear cub moving close to the snow rise. From where she stood, it appeared to be alone. At first, she laughed about it with a few people nearby, joking that the cub looked friendly. Then the moment shifted into something worse. Lesta started boasting that she could get close enough to hug it for a photo. A couple people in the group immediately told her not to even think about it, but she kept playing it off like the danger was exaggerated, smiling, waving her gloves towards the cub, acting like the warnings were part of the joke. Reading through the comments, I see a lot of people calling polar bears huggable or fluffy. It's a tempting thought, but having looked into what these animals are truly capable of, that soft exterior is a terrifying mask. Lesta stepped past the designated group boundary and moved toward the cub anyway. Polar bears are the largest land carnivores on Earth. Adults can exceed 1,500 pounds and cover open terrain at 25 miles per hour. Unlike most large carnivores, they do not treat human proximity as a deterrent. A polar bear responding to a threat near a cub does not give a warning charge. The movement is immediate, direct, and it does not stop. Lesta crouched within several yards of the cub and extended her arms outward toward it, laughing back toward her friends, as if proving she could actually do it. Members of the group further back had already started shouting warnings toward her position. The cub shifted near the ridge line. A full-grown adult emerged from behind the snow-covered ridge within seconds. The distance between the adult and Lesta was already dangerously close before either position could fully register. And this is the part that keeps hitting me. There was never a version of this where she saw the cub, and it was actually alone. The adult was there the entire time. The ridge was just hiding it. Lesta turned immediately to retreat. There was no vehicle within reach, no barrier, no elevated surface, open tundra in every direction. The bear closed the gap across the flat terrain at full acceleration. Guides were shouting and moving toward the area, but were far too distant to physically intervene. The attack unfolded within seconds of the adult appearing, before any meaningful distance could open between Lesta and the cub's position. The impact was direct and immediate, the full force of an adult polar bear at charge driving her to the ground on the open shoreline. The injuries sustained from the strike and the bear's follow-through were unsurvivable. Several phones had captured the approach and initial contact from further along the shoreline. Others in the group had already retreated towards the vehicles. Guides radioed for emergency assistance immediately. Investigators confirmed a fatal polar bear attack directly linked to close proximity to a cub outside the designated group area. Lesta's family received the news within hours, and the people who were standing on that shoreline with her, the same friends she had been joking with moments earlier, had to carry home the memory of watching that confidence disappear in seconds. It was July 9th, 2014, and the humid evening air hung heavy over a private exotic cat sanctuary in rural Florida as 23-year-old Jessica Park completed her final feeding rounds of the day. The facility housed over 60 rescued big cats, including several cougars and other apex predators. Jessica had been volunteering at the sanctuary for 6 weeks as part of her veterinary school's summer internship program, gaining hands-on experience with exotic species that would enhance her future career in wildlife medicine. Jessica was pursuing her doctorate in veterinary medicine at the University of Florida, where her academic focus on large carnivore behavior had earned recognition from professors. Her undergraduate degree in animal behavior had provided theoretical knowledge about predator psychology, but her practical experience had been limited to domestic animals and smaller wildlife species. The evening feeding routine was typically supervised by senior staff members, but budget constraints had reduced weekend staffing to essential personnel only. Jessica had demonstrated competence during her 6 weeks at the facility and had been authorized to assist with routine feeding tasks, though strict distance and barrier protocols remained in place. Scout was a 7-year-old male cougar who had been rescued as a cub from illegal captivity and raised at the sanctuary. The 140-pound cat had lived in the same enclosure for 5 years, developing routines and territorial behaviors predators that Jessica had observed and documented. Cougars, also known as mountain lions or pumas, can weigh up to 160 pounds and possess the muscular build and lightning-fast reflexes that make them efficient hunters. These solitary cats are highly territorial and can become aggressive without warning, particularly when humans approach too closely or display threatening body language. Their powerful forelimbs and retractable claws can inflict devastating injuries in seconds. Jessica decided to document her work with Scout for her veterinary school portfolio, believing that a selfie with the cougar would demonstrate her expertise. Scout had just finished eating and was lying near the chain-link fence. Jessica positioned herself approximately 3 feet from the enclosure, close enough to capture both herself and Scout in the same frame. What Jessica didn't realize was that a maintenance gap in the secondary barrier had been left temporarily open, allowing closer access to the primary fence than safety protocols permitted. Jessica activated her phone's camera and held it at arm's length. Scout's yellow eyes tracked her movements with focused attention. Jessica leaned closer to improve the photo angle, her proximity and forward posture triggering the aggressive response. Scout exploded into motion with lightning speed, his powerful hind legs launching his 140-pound body toward the fence. His front paws extended through the chain link gaps created by the maintenance opening, his razor-sharp claws fully extended as they sought purchase on Jessica's neck and shoulder. The cougar's incredible reach through the maintenance gap allowed him to grab Jessica, his claws penetrating deep into her flesh as he pulled her violently against the enclosure. Jessica's phone fell from her hand as Scout's claws raked across her neck and shoulder, the sharp talons tearing through skin and muscle tissue. The cougar's other paw grabbed her head, his powerful muscles applying crushing force, while his claws inflicted deep lacerations across her scalp and face. Jessica was pulled hard against the fence, the impact causing her to lose her footing and fall backward, striking her head on the concrete walkway. Scout maintained his grip through the fence, his claws continuing to rake across Jessica's upper body as she lay partially against the enclosure. The attack lasted approximately 15 seconds before Scout released his grip and retreated. Jessica lay motionless on the ground, massive lacerations covering her neck, shoulders, and head, with severe trauma from both the mauling and the fall. Blood pooled rapidly around her body. Another volunteer discovered Jessica minutes later and immediately called emergency services, but the combination of severe blood loss and head trauma had already proven fatal. Paramedics arrived within 12 minutes, but could only confirm what was already evident. The investigation revealed that Jessica had violated sanctuary safety protocols by entering the restricted maintenance area and positioning herself within reach of the enclosure. Following a formal investigation and risk assessment, Scout was euthanized due to the severity of the incident and the enclosure breach. Jessica's death shocked the veterinary community and highlighted the gap between academic knowledge and practical experience when dealing with apex predators. Her family established a scholarship fund supporting wildlife safety research. Yet, Jessica's tragic encounter with a captive predator was not the only time someone's confidence in their animal expertise would prove fatally misplaced. Off the coast of Florida, an experienced fisherman's knowledge of marine predators would fail him when he underestimated the explosive power of one of the ocean's most dangerous. It was June 8, 2020, in the vast wetlands of Big Cypress National Preserve, Florida, where private swampland stretches for miles through sawgrass prairies and cypress domes. The remote backcountry waterways, accessible only by airboat or shallow draft vessels, harbor some of America's largest alligator populations. During the peak of mating season, territorial male alligators become increasingly aggressive, defending prime nesting areas along muddy banks and shallow channels. The humid air hung thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and stagnant water. Keith Renshaw, a 35-year-old freelance wildlife photographer from Denver, had spent the last 3 years struggling to establish himself in the competitive nature photography market. His recent divorce had left him financially strained, desperately needing a breakthrough assignment to secure a potential contract with National Geographic. Keith's perfectionist personality and growing arrogance had led him to take increasingly dangerous risks for unique shots that other photographers wouldn't attempt. He had hired Jake Morrison, a local Seminole guide with decades of swamp experience, for an exclusive tour of restricted backcountry areas known for trophy-sized alligators. Keith's dismissive attitude toward local expertise and his obsession with capturing the perfect shot had already caused tension conservation during their morning expedition. The preserve's waterways were experiencing peak alligator activity due to the June breeding season. Morrison had warned Keith repeatedly about the heightened aggression of territorial males, but the photographer's determination to capture dramatic images overshadowed his caution. They had spotted several large bulls throughout the day, but Keith remained unsatisfied with the distance and lighting conditions for his shots. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds, with bite forces measuring nearly 3,000 pounds per square inch. During mating season, territorial bulls become extremely aggressive, defending prime nesting sites and responding violently to any perceived intrusion. Their powerful tails can propel them through water at speeds up to 25 miles per hour, while their explosive launch from water to land can cover distances of 6 feet vertically. Despite their bulky appearance, alligators possess lightning-fast reflexes and can remain motionless for hours before striking with devastating speed. At 3:45 p.m., Keith spotted a massive 12-foot bull alligator sunning on a muddy bank near a narrow channel. The reptile's scarred hide and impressive girth indicated an old, dominant male defending prime territory. Morrison immediately recognized the danger signs. The alligator's elevated position on the bank and its alert posture suggested heightened territorial awareness. Despite urgent warnings from his guide, Keith insisted on approaching closer for better photographic angles. Keith slowly waded into the murky water, his expensive camera equipment held high above the surface. The water reached his waist as he moved within 6 feet of the massive reptile, which remained motionless except for its eyes tracking his movement. Morrison shouted warnings from the boat, but Keith dismissed them as overcautious local superstition. The attack came without warning. The 12-foot bull exploded from the bank with terrifying speed, his massive body launching through the air before crashing into the water. His enormous jaws snapped shut around Keith's torso just below his ribcage, the 80 razor-sharp teeth puncturing through his abdomen and lower chest. The initial bite force of nearly 3,000 psi crushed several ribs and punctured his liver and stomach, causing immediate internal bleeding. The death roll began instantly. The alligator spun violently in the water, using his powerful tail and body weight to disorient his victim. Keith's body rotated helplessly as the spinning motion tore muscles and ligaments while forcing muddy water into his mouth and nose. The crushing pressure of the jaws compressed his internal organs as his ribs cracked audibly with each rotation. After 4 complete 360-degree spins, the alligator's grip shifted, allowing more water to flood Keith's airways. The massive reptile then began dragging Keith toward deeper water, maintaining his crushing grip while Keith's consciousness faded from oxygen deprivation. The muddy swamp water filled his lungs as he remained trapped in the alligator's jaws. Unable to surface or breathe, his struggles grew weaker as drowning combined with massive internal trauma from the crushing bite. The alligator held him underwater for nearly 3 minutes, ensuring his prey was completely subdued before releasing the lifeless body. Keith's body floated to the surface, showing extensive crush injuries across his torso and abdomen. The alligator's teeth had left deep puncture wounds, while the death roll had caused severe internal damage to his organs and skeletal structure. However, the primary cause of death was drowning, as swamp water had completely filled his lungs during the prolonged underwater struggle. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols for guided tours in alligator habitats during breeding season. It was May 11th, 2015, when the African sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the floodplains of northern Botswana in shades of amber and burnt orange. Along the riverfront of Shelby National Park, the air was thick with humidity and the sounds of the bush, distant elephants trumpeting, fish eagles circling overhead, and low guttural grunts of massive creatures moving through the shallows just beyond the tree line. This stretch of river was one of the most biodiverse corridors on the continent, where elephants, buffalo, crocodiles, and one of Africa's most dangerous animals converged every evening, as the heat gave way to golden hour. 27-year-old Ava Spratt had traveled to Botswana with 3 close friends after finishing a freelance project documenting nature travel destinations across southern Africa. Ava was a wildlife photography content creator who had recently shifted towards safari imagery, building a growing portfolio of close-range animal portraits that set her apart from the standard landscape photographers flooding the market. Her ambition was clear. She wanted shots that made the viewer feel as though they were standing face-to-face with Africa's most iconic species. That ambition had brought her here, to the edge of one of the most dangerous waterways on the continent. The group had booked a guided afternoon game drive along the riverfront, a popular excursion that followed dirt tracks running parallel to the water's edge. Their guide was experienced, a local professional who had spent years navigating these routes. He drove an open-sided 4x4 safari vehicle, elevated enough to provide safety but completely open on the sides, relying on passengers to remain seated at all times. As the afternoon wore on, the vehicle slowed near a narrow section of shoreline the guide mentioned was often used by hippos moving between the river and grazing areas at dusk, a spot known among guides as a crossing point. The guide warned the group to stay seated, explaining that animals frequently used this exact path and that blocking it could provoke a charge. Hippopotamuses are widely regarded as the most dangerous large land animal in Africa, responsible for more human fatalities than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined. Despite their rotund appearance, hippos are extraordinarily aggressive and capable of astonishing violence. An adult male can weigh over 4,000 pounds, yet move at speeds close to 20 miles per hour on land, faster than most humans can sprint. Hippos do not attack to feed. They attack because they perceive a threat to their territory or their path between water and land. When a hippo charges, there is no bluff. What makes them particularly unpredictable is their behavior at dusk. They follow established routes from river to grazing land with rigid consistency, and any obstacle along that route is treated as a direct threat. The response is immediate and violent. Ava spotted a large hippo partially submerged near the shore, ears twitching and nostrils flaring above the waterline. The proximity was closer than anything she had captured before, and the fading light created exactly the dramatic conditions she had been chasing. She stood up from her seat, bracing one foot on the side rail and leaning her upper body outside the open frame of the vehicle. The guide immediately told her to sit down, but she remained standing, adjusting her camera for a few more seconds, her torso now fully outside the vehicle's profile. That was the fatal mistake. The hippo had been preparing to move inland along its established crossing route, the same route the vehicle was now partially blocking. When the animal registered the vehicle and the figure protruding from its side, it surged from the water with terrifying speed, charging directly toward the track. The guide slammed the accelerator, but the track sloped towards the riverbank, and the rear wheels hit loose sand churned up by previous vehicles. The tires spun briefly before catching traction, and the sudden movement threw Ava off balance while she was leaning outside the frame of the vehicle, leaving her no way to recover. She fell from the open side, hitting the ground beside the track. The charging hippo reached her within seconds. Weighing over 2 tons and moving at full speed, it struck her with its front body and knocked her to the ground, then continued forward along the crossing path, trampling her as it forced its way past the vehicle rather than stopping to attack. The impact caused devastating injuries, crushed ribs, severe chest trauma, shattered pelvic bones, and massive internal bleeding that began immediately. The hippo appeared focused on clearing the path and quickly moved back toward the shallows, disappearing into the water within moments. The guide drove forward several meters before stopping and radioing for emergency assistance. A patrol unit from the nearest checkpoint was dispatched immediately. Ava was unconscious when the response team arrived, her breathing shallow and irregular. She was transported toward the nearest medical facility outside the reserve, but died from severe internal injuries before reaching the hospital. The official report listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma, consistent with being trampled by a large animal. The investigation concluded that while the vehicle had stopped closer to the crossing route than intended, the fatal sequence was triggered by the passenger standing and leaning outside the vehicle during an active wildlife encounter. The guide was questioned during the review, but was cleared after officials determined the safety instructions had been given before the stop. The wildlife photography community responded with grief and frustration, many noting that the pressure to capture increasingly dramatic content was pushing creators into situations no photograph was worth. It was September 3rd, 2016, and the South African bush was dry and still in the way it gets in early spring. Kruger National Park covers nearly 2 million hectares of raw wilderness in the country's northeast. Self-drive visitors move through it on a network of gravel and dirt roads, and from inside a vehicle, the terrain feels manageable. That framing matters because it's the inside part that keeps you alive. Kevin Dratt was 34, worked a general office job, and treated travel content as a side project. His friends knew him for getting closer to animals than he should not out of ignorance, but as a deliberate choice. He had a pattern, and the pattern followed him into Kruger. He wasn't the type to quietly observe wildlife. He treated dangerous animals like interactive content, something to poke at until they reacted. Park signage can be seen everywhere in the park, reminding visitors to stay inside their cars and keep their windows closed near large carnivores. Most importantly, do not provoke or attempt to engage predators. In a reserve where lions and leopards pass within meters of vehicles every single day, those rules exist for a specific reason. He stopped his vehicle along a dirt road after spotting lions resting near the roadside brush. He lowered the driver's side window completely and started narrating to his phone camera. Instead of keeping distance like the surrounding vehicles, Kevin rolled several feet closer along the shoulder to get a cleaner shot. He rested his elbow on the open window frame and casually hung part of his upper body outside the vehicle while filming, treating the stop more like a safari attraction than a predator encounter. Lions are apex predators. Adult males can exceed 550 pounds, and their bite force sits around 650 pounds per square inch, enough to hold weight and crush bone simultaneously. They are ambush hunters, but they are also opportunistic, and movement near a resting position registers as a stimulus regardless of what the source intends. They do not process the difference between someone performing for a camera and something closing in on their space. Kevin leaned further out the window as he filmed, making clicking noises and gesturing toward the lions to pull their attention. At one point, he repeatedly snapped his fingers and lightly slapped the outside of the vehicle door to make one of the lions look toward him. When it didn't react immediately, he stretched his arm farther out and waved it back and forth like he was trying to entertain an audience. He extended his arm outside the vehicle, holding the phone for a wider angle. Other vehicles had stopped farther back. Some passengers were already recording. The clearest sign he wasn't taking the animal seriously was what he didn't do. When one lion lifted its head and locked onto the movement near the window, Kevin didn't pull back inside the car. He stayed outside the frame of the vehicle, kept filming, and leaned even farther outward to maintain the shot. Every normal survival instinct, create distance, close the window, stop provoking it, got overridden by the need to keep the moment going. I truly don't understand. Kevin wasn't some clueless tourist who didn't know better. He saw the same warning signs everyone else did driving through that park. He understood the risk. He just decided, in that moment, that what he wanted was worth more than the rules. One lion rose from the brush and began moving toward the vehicle. Kevin kept filming, leaning partially outside the open window, stretching his arm further to hold the animal in frame as the distance closed. Even then, he treated the approach almost like proof the stunt was working. Instead of retreating, he angled the phone lower and leaned farther out to keep the lion centered in the shot. When the lion reached within a few feet of the door, his arm was still extended outside. The lion lunged upward without warning, an immediate, explosive movement toward the exposed arm at the window opening. Its jaws clamped onto Kevin's forearm, and one forepaw drove hard against the vehicle door and window frame in the same motion. The force wrenched his upper body sideways into the metal edge of the opening. Kevin pulled backward. His torso was already partially outside the vehicle. The pull dragged him against the rigid door frame while the lion held its grip. and twisted. The wrenching force of a locked jaw, combined with repeated contact of his neck and upper chest against the metal frame, produced severe trauma across multiple areas within seconds. The movement from inside the vehicle stopped. The lion released and backed away from the door. Nearby drivers hadn't moved. Some were shouting. Others had frozen completely. Several phones were still recording. Rangers responded after emergency radio calls from nearby drivers. Investigators confirmed fatal injuries consistent with a close-range predator encounter through a fully open vehicle window. Severe trauma to the forearm, neck, and upper chest. Footage involving the incident was kept private for further investigation. Kevin's family was reportedly devastated, and those who knew him apparently weren't entirely surprised, which is the hardest part of this whole thing to sit with. The exact behavior that got him killed, pushing closer, provoking reactions, treating wild animals like props, was apparently something he'd normalized long before that day. It was August 22, 2017, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the surf at New Smyrna Beach, Florida, as 28-year-old Ryan O'Connor waded into the chest-deep water with his fishing rod and tackle box. The beach, notorious for having the highest shark attack rate in the world, attracted serious anglers who understood that the same conditions that brought sharks also created excellent fishing opportunities. Ryan had been fishing these waters for over a decade, first as a teenager with his father, and later as a professional charter boat captain who guided clients to some of the most productive fishing grounds along Florida's East Coast. Ryan operated a successful charter fishing business out of Daytona Beach, where his reputation for finding fish and keeping clients safe had earned him steady bookings throughout the year. His girlfriend Amanda had driven down from Jacksonville to spend the day at the beach, and Ryan had promised to show her the wade fishing techniques that had made him successful. The fishing pier extending into the Atlantic Ocean created perfect conditions for encountering large predatory fish, as the structure attracted bait fish that drew sharks into the shallow water near shore. Ryan had been fishing for 2 hours when his heavy tackle rod bent double. The fight lasted 20 minutes as Ryan worked to bring his catch closer to shore, his experience telling him that he had hooked a significant shark. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species except great whites and tiger sharks. These aggressive predators can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with bite forces measuring over 1,300 pounds per square inch. Bull sharks are unique among sharks for their ability to function in both saltwater and freshwater, allowing them to hunt in shallow coastal areas where humans are most vulnerable. Their serrated teeth are designed to tear through flesh and tissue with devastating efficiency. Ryan successfully brought the exhausted 7-foot bull shark into the shallow water near shore, where the animal lay momentarily still after its lengthy fight against the fishing line. Instead of cutting the line and allowing the shark to swim away, Ryan decided to document his catch with a selfie before releasing it. He waded closer to the shark, which was lying in 3 feet of water with the hook still embedded in its jaw. Ryan positioned himself next to the bull shark and activated his phone's camera, holding the device at arm's length to capture both himself and his impressive catch. As Ryan leaned closer to improve the angle, his leg brushed against the shark's tail. The bull shark's recovery was sudden and explosive, its powerful tail thrashing violently as it regained enough energy to attempt escape. The shark's muscular body twisted and rolled in the surf, creating a chaotic scene of spray and foam as hundreds of pounds of predator fought for survival. The bull shark's jaws clamped onto Ryan's thigh as the animal continued its violent struggle, its razor-sharp serrated teeth tearing through skin and penetrating deep into the major blood vessels that supplied his leg. The bite lasted only seconds, but the damage was catastrophic as the shark's teeth tore through the upper inner thigh and severed the femoral artery, causing massive arterial bleeding that immediately began flooding the surrounding water with blood. The shark released its grip and thrashed away from Ryan, its powerful body propelling it back toward deeper water. Ryan stumbled backward in the blood-stained surf, his hands clutching clutching at his thigh, where blood poured from the deep lacerations. Other fishermen saw the commotion and rushed into the water, pulling Ryan toward the shore as he began losing consciousness from the rapid blood loss. They dragged him onto the sand and immediately applied pressure to the wound while someone called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and worked frantically to control the bleeding, applying tourniquets and pressure bandages while preparing Ryan for transport. Despite their efforts to stabilize him, the damage to the femoral artery had caused blood loss too severe to overcome. Ryan lost consciousness on the beach and died during transport to the hospital, roughly 20 minutes after the attack. The investigation revealed that Ryan had violated basic shark safety protocols by approaching an exhausted but still dangerous predator in shallow water where escape was impossible. The bull shark had exhibited normal defensive behavior when physically contacted, and no effort was made to locate or destroy the animal. Ryan's family was devastated by the loss of a son and brother who had made his living from the ocean he loved. Amanda struggled with survivor's guilt and eventually moved away from Florida, unable to remain near the waters where Ryan had died. But Ryan's fatal encounter with a bull shark was not the only time someone's misplaced trust in their understanding of animal behavior would prove deadly. At a primate sanctuary in Ohio, a volunteer's academic knowledge would fail him when confronted with the explosive strength of humanity's closest relative. It was January 12, 2023, at the Kibale Chimpanzee Rescue Sanctuary in the dense rainforests of western Uganda, where towering mahogany trees create a natural canopy over 30 acres of protected habitat. The facility serves as a rehabilitation center for chimpanzees rescued from illegal pet trade and bushmeat hunting. Morning mist hung heavy in the humid air as hooting calls echoed through the forest corridors. The sanctuary housed 47 rescued chimpanzees, many displaying behavioral issues from their traumatic captivity experiences. Wesley Boone, a 31-year-old veterinary student from Vancouver, had taken a gap year to gain hands-on experience with exotic animals. His compassionate but naive personality led him to anthropomorphize the chimpanzees, treating them more like intelligent humans than wild animals capable of extreme violence. Wesley's inexperience with primate behavior, combined with his overconfidence in animal handling skills, created a dangerous combination. He had been volunteering at the sanctuary for 3 months, documenting his experiences for his modest Instagram following of 3,200 followers. His desire to capture compelling content had driven him to seek increasingly close interactions, despite strict facility protocols prohibiting direct contact. The sanctuary's most challenging resident was Caesar, a 150-pound adult male chimpanzee rescued from illegal captivity 2 years earlier. Caesar had been kept as a pet until he became too aggressive for his captors to handle. His history of abuse had left him with severe behavioral problems, including sudden violent outbursts triggered by direct eye contact, perceived challenges to his dominance, or unexpected movements. Staff members had repeatedly warned volunteers about Caesar's unpredictable nature and the strict protocols requiring barriers between humans and adult males. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing 98% of human DNA, but they possess physical capabilities that far exceed human strength and aggression. Adult male chimpanzees can weigh up to 200 pounds and possess arm strength 5 times greater than humans. Their canine teeth can reach lengths of 2 inches, designed for tearing flesh and establishing dominance through violence. Even hand-raised chimps retain their capacity for explosive violence, with attacks often targeting faces, hands, and genitals to inflict maximum damage. Their incredible grip strength can crush bones, while their speed makes escape nearly impossible. At 2:45 p.m., Wesley made the fatal decision to enter Caesar's enclosure while the large male appeared to be resting peacefully. He had observed Caesar for weeks and believed he understood the chimp's behavioral patterns well enough to predict safe interaction opportunities. Wesley quietly slipped through the enclosure gate, his phone ready to capture what he hoped would be an impressive selfie demonstrating his bond with the rescued primate. Caesar initially remained motionless as Wesley approached, sitting approximately 20 feet away near the back wall. The chimp's relaxed posture gave Wesley false confidence that the interaction would remain peaceful. As Wesley raised his phone and moved closer for the perfect shot, he made direct eye contact contact with Caesar while extending the device toward both of them. The eye contact triggered Caesar's aggressive response instantly. In chimpanzee social hierarchy, direct staring represents a challenge to dominance that demands violent retaliation. Caesar's hair stood on end as he bared his massive canine teeth and emitted a threatening scream. The attack began with explosive speed as Caesar charged across the enclosure, covering the distance in less than 3 seconds. His powerful arms grabbed Wesley's face with crushing force, his fingers digging into the soft tissue around his eyes and cheeks. Caesar's incredible grip strength immediately began crushing the delicate bones of Wesley's facial structure. Caesar's 2-inch canine teeth tore into Wesley's throat with surgical precision, puncturing his trachea and severing his carotid artery in one devastating bite. Blood immediately began pouring from the massive wound as Wesley's airway filled with fluid, preventing him from screaming. The chimp's powerful jaws maintained their grip on his throat, while his hands continued crushing Wesley's face and skull. The frenzied assault continued as Caesar bit off 2 of Wesley's fingers and tore away large sections of his scalp and left ear. The chimp's attacks were rapid and brutal, targeting the most vulnerable areas with devastating efficiency. Caesar's incredible strength allowed him to shake Wesley violently while maintaining his crushing grip. The violence lasted approximately 45 seconds before Caesar suddenly stopped attacking and retreated to the far corner of the enclosure. This abrupt cessation is typical of chimpanzee aggression, where explosive attacks end as quickly as they begin once dominance is established. Wesley collapsed to the concrete floor, his crushed windpipe preventing normal breathing, while massive blood loss from his severed carotid artery caused rapid deterioration. The combination of asphyxiation and hemorrhaging proved immediately fatal. He died within 2 minutes, his body showing extensive facial trauma, missing digits, and catastrophic throat injuries. Sanctuary staff discovered Wesley's body during the afternoon feeding routine 15 minutes later. Caesar remained in the corner, showing no further aggression, but clearly agitated. Ugandan wildlife authorities launched an investigation into the incident, reviewing safety protocols and volunteer supervision procedures. Wesley Boone's story demonstrated how humanity's closest relatives can turn lethal when their behavioral triggers are misunderstood. It was March 12, 2018, Bandhavgarh National Park, central India. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Sal forest, casting long, broken shadows across the narrow dirt tracks that cut through the reserve. The air was heavy with heat and dust, thick with the distant calls of deer and the occasional shriek of langurs echoing through the canopy. On either side of the track, walls of elephant grass rose chest high, head high in places, a dense, shifting sea of vegetation that hid everything behind it. Gaps in the grass allowed a meter or 2 of visibility. Beyond that, nothing. Just green and whatever chose to stand inside it. Marvin Smith was 36 years old. A warehouse supervisor back home and liked to film content from time to time, Marvin had flown to India with 2 longtime friends for a guided jeep safari, a trip he had been planning for the better part of a year. He wanted to film this moment, a moment to share and have fun. None of them had ever visited India before. Their understanding of tiger behavior was limited to documentaries and brief pre-safari briefings. Marvin was the proactive one of the group, the one who moved first, who pushed for closer views, who didn't always wait for the guide's cue. The signs had been there from the start of the day. Earlier, Marvin had stood briefly in the jeep, despite clear instructions to stay seated. During previous sightings, he had leaned outside the vehicle frame for photos, ignoring reminders from the guide. When told that the tall grass reduced visibility and sharply increased risk, he had listened, but only partially. The Bengal tiger is the largest living cat on the subcontinent and one of the most efficient solitary predators on Earth. A mature male can exceed 220 kilograms. It hunts primarily by ambush, using cover, silence, and patience to close within striking distance before exploding forward in a burst of speed and force that almost no prey animal can counter. Its canines drive deep into the neck. Its forelimbs hook, pull, and destabilize animals far larger than a human. A single bite to the throat can end a struggle in seconds. Tigers in parks like Bandhavgarh have grown accustomed to vehicle presence. They rest close to tracks, sometimes within meters, concealed by grass so thick that even experienced guides cannot see them. Late afternoon, the jeep had stopped along a narrow track bordered by towering walls of elephant grass. Alarm calls from deer deeper inside the vegetation had caught the guide's attention. The guide shifted focus, scanning the grass line. In that brief lapse, Marvin stepped down from the jeep, wanting to film the scenery. He moved quickly, fast enough that the guide could not react in time to stop him. Within seconds, he had pushed 5 to 8 meters into the grass. Inside the vegetation, the world changed. The ground was uneven, stalks resisting every step. Visibility collapsed to a meter or two. Sound became muffled and directionless. A tiger was already there, concealed in the cover, low to the ground, alert from the alarm calls. The animal had held its position as Marvin advanced. The moment the distance closed to within a few meters, the response triggered. The charge was explosive, a short, direct burst from concealment. The tiger made contact at the upper body, a crushing bite securing the shoulder and neck region, one forelimb hooking across the torso. The combined force drove Marvin off his feet and pulled him sideways to the ground. Once he was down, the tiger adjusted. The grip shifted in stages, repositioning across the throat until it settled into a stable killing hold. Sustained pressure compressed the airway. Major blood vessels in the neck were constricted, reducing blood flow to the brain. The struggle that followed was brief and uncoordinated, cut short by rapid physiological collapse. Loss of consciousness came within seconds to minutes. The tiger held position, maintaining bite pressure. Then it began to move, dragging the body deeper into the grass, vanishing completely from view. Death came from combined asphyxiation and reduced cerebral blood flow, compounded by severe soft tissue trauma to the neck. The guide had immediately ordered the remaining passengers to stay seated and still. A brief attempt to deter the animal with shouting and engine noise was made from the vehicle, but no approach was attempted. Forest authorities were radioed, and the scene was held from distance. An investigation followed in the days after. The findings were consistent. A visitor who exited the vehicle without permission, in dense cover, in the immediate space of an animal no one had known was there. Marvin's family received the news with shock and grief. The public reaction carried the familiar weight that follows these stories: sorrow and the quiet recognition that tigers in the tall grass do not give second chances. It was April 22nd, 2018, and the Merrick Medina was already alive with noise by mid-morning. The market moves the way it always does, every corridor branching into another, every corner holding a new vendor, a new crowd, a new spectacle. Snake handlers work these tourist corridors regularly, setting up with cobras raised on low platforms while visitors stop for photos at a set distance. Drell was 29, freelance in the most irregular sense, and relying heavily on viral moments for visibility. He traveled to find footage that got shared, not structured shoots, not planned productions, opportunistic moments. The riskier, the better. His companions traveled with him and filmed everything. At the display that morning, a handler had a cobra raised upright for tourist photos. The verbal warning was clear: maintain distance, keep your face and hands away from striking range, stay behind the marker. Most visitors took their photo and stepped back. Drell wanted what he called a kiss, shot something reckless and funny he could show his family back home as proof of how close he'd gotten to a real cobra in Morocco. Encouraged by his companions filming beside him, he crouched and moved past the suggested boundary until his face was level with the snake's head. Then he leaned even closer, puckering slightly toward the cobra, as if posing for a fake kiss photo. To the cobra, the movement wasn't playful. A large shape was advancing directly toward its head, the kind of forward pressure snakes interpret as a threat. The cobra tracked the movement, staying upright and locked directly onto the closest point in front of it. The handler immediately changed tone and moved in faster once Drell's face entered striking distance. The gap closed to inches. Egyptian cobras are among Africa's most dangerous snakes. Their venom is predominantly neurotoxic. It targets the nervous system and works in stages, shutting down muscle control progressively over hours. The danger isn't always immediate, which makes it more insidious. A bite can feel survivable in the first minutes. It rarely is. Their strike speed is measured in milliseconds. At the range Drell had closed to, there was no reaction time available to anyone. The cobra struck. The bite landed along the lip and lower face, fangs driving into soft tissue at near zero distance. Drell recoiled instantly and stumbled backward from the display. The handler secured the cobra immediately after the strike. All I can say is Drell thought he was creating a memorable moment, but Cobra thought it otherwise. He remained on his feet, holding his face, while his companions filmed portions of what followed. The strike itself had been captured clearly on multiple phones. Market activity slowed around them as people cleared space and emergency calls were made. Over the following hours, the neurotoxin moved through his system exactly as it's designed to. His eyelids began drooping. His speech became slurred and increasingly difficult to follow. He struggled to hold his head upright as muscle control deteriorated progressively. Breathing became visibly shallow as the toxin continued its work on his respiratory system. Responders arrived, but the envenomation had advanced too far for intervention to reverse it. He died from respiratory failure caused by the venom's neurotoxic effects. Local investigators confirmed fatal envenomation from the cobra bite. Witness accounts described the clear progression of neurotoxic symptoms before death. Market operators reiterated distance rules for tourist interactions, and some vendors temporarily restricted close contact photo setups in the immediate aftermath. It was May 30th, 2013, and the afternoon sun filtered through the trees surrounding the primarily primates sanctuary in rural Ohio as 26-year-old Derek Williams completed his weekend cleaning duties in the facility's chimpanzee housing area. The sanctuary provided lifetime care for over 40 rescued primates, including several chimpanzees that had been retired from entertainment careers or rescued from private ownership. Derek had been volunteering at the facility for 8 months while pursuing his degree in animal behavior, gaining practical experience that complemented his academic studies of primate psychology and social dynamics. Derek was working toward his master's degree in animal behavior at Ohio State University, where his research focused on the cognitive abilities and emotional intelligence of great apes. His academic work had given him extensive theoretical knowledge about chimpanzee behavior, communication, and social structures, but his practical experience had been limited to controlled laboratory settings and brief, supervised interactions. Weekend shifts at the sanctuary typically involved minimal supervision, as budget constraints limited staffing to essential personnel during non-visiting hours. Caesar was a 35-year-old male chimpanzee who had spent 20 years performing in television commercials and movies before being retired to the sanctuary when he became too large and unpredictable for entertainment work. The 180-pound male had lived at the facility for 10 years, developing territorial behaviors and social hierarchies that Derek had observed and documented for his research project. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing over 98% of our DNA, but they possess physical capabilities that far exceed human limitations. Adult males can weigh up to 200 pounds and possess pulling and gripping strength estimated to be 2 to 3 times greater than that of humans. Their powerful arms and hands are capable of generating tremendous force, while their large canine teeth can inflict devastating bite wounds. Chimpanzees are highly territorial and can display extreme aggression when they perceive threats to their space or dominance. Derek decided to document his work with the chimpanzees for his family back in Cleveland, who had expressed interest in seeing the animals he worked with during his volunteer shifts. Caesar was sitting quietly near the front of his enclosure, appearing relaxed and content after his afternoon feeding. Derek positioned himself within 3 feet of the chain link barrier, inside a restricted service corridor not intended for prolonged human presence. Derek activated his phone's camera and held it at arm's length, smiling as he prepared to take the selfie that would show his family the impressive primates he worked with at the sanctuary. Caesar's dark eyes tracked Derek's movements with the focused attention that characterized chimpanzee behavior, but Derek interpreted the primate's gaze as curiosity rather than the the assessment of a potential threat that it actually represented. He made direct eye contact with Caesar through his phone's screen, unknowingly triggering the aggressive territorial response. Caesar moved with explosive speed, his powerful arms reaching through the chain-link fence to grab Derek's shirt and arm before the young man could react. The chimpanzee's grip was like a steel vise, his fingers possessing strength far beyond human capability as he pulled Derek violently against the enclosure barrier. Derek dropped his phone as Caesar's other hand grabbed his head, the primate's powerful fingers applying crushing pressure to his skull. Caesar's jaws clamped down on Derek's face and neck, his large canine teeth tearing through flesh and muscle as he bit repeatedly. The chimpanzee continued pulling Derek against the fence with tremendous force, his hands gripping Derek's head and shoulders while his teeth inflicted deep lacerations across Derek's face, scalp, and neck. The attack escalated as Caesar used his incredible strength to manipulate Derek's body, pulling and twisting with such force that Derek's neck and spine sustained severe trauma. Derek's screams brought other staff members running, but the attack continued for several seconds before they could respond. Caesar finally released his grip when staff members began shouting and banging on nearby enclosures to distract him. Derek collapsed to the ground, his face and neck covered in deep bite wounds, with catastrophic trauma to his head and cervical spine caused by repeated forceful pulling and sudden rotational stress. He lost consciousness within moments as staff members called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 12 minutes and worked to stabilize Derek, but the combination of massive blood loss from the facial and neck wounds, along with severe spinal trauma, proved fatal. Derek died en route to the hospital despite aggressive medical intervention. The investigation revealed that Derek had violated sanctuary safety protocols by positioning himself within reach of the enclosure and making direct eye contact with a territorial male chimpanzee. Caesar's behavior was determined to be a normal, aggressive territorial response, triggered by Derek's threatening posture and proximity. The chimpanzee was later sedated and relocated to a maximum security facility designed specifically for adult male primates with histories of aggression. Derek's death shocked the academic community and highlighted the dangers faced by researchers working with powerful primates, even in controlled environments. His family established a memorial fund supporting primate safety research, ensuring that his passion for understanding animal behavior would continue benefiting future researchers. It was January 14th, 2015, and the dry heat of Sri Lanka's southern interior was already pressing hard across the scrubland by mid-morning. Yala National Park stretches across nearly 1,000 square kilometers of dense jungle, open grassland, and rocky terrain along the island's southeastern coast, rich with wildlife at almost every turn. That morning, the safari vehicle had stopped along a roadside where an elephant was feeding just a few meters from the road's edge. Hazel was 31, worked in general service employment, and was building a travel audience on the side. Footage of close wildlife encounters was the product. She had joined a guided safari with a professional guide and clear pre-trip instructions. Stay inside the vehicle at all times. The guide had said it before the vehicle had even rolled out of camp. When the vehicle slowed near the feeding elephant, Hazel stepped out. The guide told her not to. She stepped out anyway. Another tourist inside the vehicle already had a phone pointed outward and was recording. Elephants are the largest land animals on Earth. Adult females weigh between 6,000 and 10,000 pounds and can close short distances in a charge faster than a person can process what's happening. They are not unpredictable animals. They are actually deeply expressive. A raised head, ears spread wide, weight shifting forward. These are not subtle signals. These are textbook warnings. Every wildlife guide working in any elephant habitat on the planet knows exactly what they mean. The elephant raised its head as Hazel moved toward it. Its ears fanned wide. Its weight shifted forward. She laughed and gestured toward the trunk, adjusting her position to line up a closer shot. The elephant stayed locked onto the movement directly in front of it. And I think Hazel wasn't walking toward the elephant because she doesn't know the danger. She was curious about it. Hazel reached further forward towards the trunk. The elephant's response was immediate. A sharp trumpet and a full forward surge in the same motion, the kind of acceleration that takes an animal of that size from still to a committed charge in almost no time. Hazel turned to retreat. She was standing only a few feet from its path. There was not enough distance between them. The first contact drove her violently to the ground as the elephant surged through the roadside space. The momentum didn't pause. The animal's mass carried it directly over her position during the charge, its weight moving through the space she occupied before it could redirect or slow. Dust and debris rose around the impact zone, partially obscuring the sequence in the footage as the elephant cleared the road's edge. It slowed after moving past the area. No prolonged engagement followed. It didn't circle back. The charge had lasted only seconds. Tourists inside the vehicle had not moved. Some were shouting. Others had gone completely still while still recording. Guides radioed for assistance immediately. Responders from nearby ranger posts arrived shortly after. Investigators confirmed fatal trauma consistent with a short-range elephant charge, injuries from the direct initial impact, and the weight displacement as the animal moved through her position. Park officials reiterated the requirement to remain inside safari vehicles throughout all wildlife encounters. Tour operators briefly reviewed their guide protocols and visitor briefings, though no major policy changes followed the incident. Hazel's family received the news the way families always do in these situations, completely without preparation. And I think what makes this one harder is that she was on a guided trip. There was a professional present, but still it ended this way. It was October 5th, 2022, off the rugged coastline of Año Nuevo State Park, California, where the Pacific Ocean meets dramatic cliffs and rocky outcroppings. This remote stretch of coast serves as critical habitat for elephant seals and harbor seals during breeding season. The area's abundant marine life creates a natural feeding ground that attracts some of the ocean's most formidable predators. Cold currents bring nutrient-rich waters close to shore, supporting massive populations of fish, seals, and sea lions. Shelby Grant, a 26-year-old graduate student in marine biology at UC Santa Barbara, was conducting independent research on great white shark behavior patterns for her doctoral thesis. Her academic confidence had convinced her that she could predict shark actions better than recreational surfers. Shelby's passionate but reckless personality often led her to take unnecessary risks that other researchers avoided. Her competitive drive to publish groundbreaking research had brought her to Año Nuevo specifically because of recent great white sightings. She maintained a modest social media presence of 4,500 followers, documenting her marine research adventures. The area was experiencing a significant boom in seal populations, which naturally attracted large predatory sharks. Recent reports from California Department of Fish and Wildlife had documented increased great white activity along this coastline, with several confirmed sightings of sharks exceeding 15 feet in length. Local surf shops had posted warnings about elevated shark presence, but Shelby's academic background made her believe she possessed superior understanding of shark behavior. Great white sharks are the ocean's apex predators, capable of reaching lengths over 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. Their powerful tails can propel them through water at speeds up to 35 miles per hour, while their ability to launch themselves completely out of the water demonstrates incredible power. A great white's mouth contains up to 300 serrated teeth arranged in multiple rows, each designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Their bite force can exceed 4,000 pounds per square inch, easily capable of severing human limbs. Great whites typically employ ambush tactics, attacking from below with explosive speed. At 11:30 a.m., Shelby paddled her surfboard to a position approximately 200 yards from shore, where water depth reached 40 feet. When she spotted a large dorsal fin cutting through the water 50 feet away, Shelby immediately recognized it as belonging to a massive great white shark. Rather than paddling to shore, she pulled out her waterproof camera and began filming the encounter. The 16-foot shark began circling her position in increasingly tight patterns, displaying typical investigative behavior. Shelby remained motionless on her surfboard, believing her knowledge would keep her safe. The great white's circles grew progressively smaller, bringing the massive predator within 20 feet of her position. Without warning, the massive great white launched its attack from directly below. The shark's explosive vertical assault lifted both Shelby and her board partially out of the water as its enormous jaws clamped down on her left leg and the surfboard's edge simultaneously. The impact generated tremendous force as 300 razor-sharp teeth sliced through her femur, completely severing her leg at mid-thigh level. The initial bite caused catastrophic trauma as the shark's serrated teeth cut through bone, muscle, and major blood vessels with surgical precision. Her femoral artery was completely severed, causing immediate massive hemorrhaging that turned the surrounding water crimson. The shark's 4,000 psi bite force crushed her femur into multiple fragments, while its teeth created deep lacerations extending from her hip to her knee. Following typical great white behavior, the shark immediately released Shelby and disappeared beneath the surface. This bite and release pattern occurs when sharks realize humans are not their preferred prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. Shelby remained conscious but in severe shock from the massive trauma and blood loss. Despite her devastating injuries, Shelby managed to climb back onto her damaged surfboard and began paddling desperately toward shore. Blood poured continuously from the severed femoral artery, creating an expanding red trail in the water. Her weakened condition made progress extremely slow. Other surfers spotted her distress from approximately 100 yards away and immediately began paddling to assist. However, Shelby had already lost massive amounts of blood during the critical minutes following the attack. She collapsed from her surfboard just 75 yards from shore, her strength completely depleted. The responding surfers reached her within 2 minutes and immediately began applying pressure to the massive wound while supporting her in the water. They rushed her toward shore while attempting to stem the hemorrhaging, but the severed femoral artery had already caused irreversible blood loss. Emergency medical personnel met them at the shoreline and began advanced trauma procedures, but Shelby had lost too much blood. She died on the beach from hemorrhagic shock, approximately 15 minutes after the initial attack. Shelby's family released a statement honoring her. It was August 9th, 2017. Everglades National Park stretches across over 1 million acres of sawgrass marsh and slow black water at the southern tip of Florida, home to one of the densest alligator populations on the continent. The docks extending over the water here aren't just viewing platforms. They put you directly above animals that have been running the same ambush formula for 37 million years. The dock sat only a few feet above the waterline. Warning signs throughout the park are explicit. Do not feed or lure wildlife. Do not approach alligators. Those signs exist because elevated platforms, dark water, and people holding food create exactly the kind of setup that ends badly. Grixen was 38, worked manual labor, and ran a fishing content channel on the side. He was known for using bait to draw animals closer to the dock for dramatic footage, not just catching fish, but engineering encounters. He'd done it before. It had worked before. That was the problem. He attached a fish to a line, lowered it just above the surface, and propped his phone on the railing angled downward for an overhead shot. Then, instead of simply dangling the bait, he started jerking it side to side over the water like he was teasing a dog with a toy, laughing toward the camera and pulling it away each time movement appeared below. At one point, he crouched near the edge and slapped the dock railing twice with his palm to draw more attention from the animal beneath him. Nearby visitors had already stopped walking. A few had their phones out. Then the water below started moving. American alligators are ambush predators built for exactly this scenario. Adults reach 13 feet and over 1,000 pounds, with a bite force around 2,900 pounds per square inch. In the water, they are fast and completely silent until they aren't. Their kill mechanism, the death roll, is a rapid spinning rotation used to disorient, submerge, and tear. They do not need deep water to execute it. Grixen saw the wake forming beneath the bait and grinned toward his phone instead of backing away. He lifted the fish just out of reach once, then lowered it again almost directly over the approaching shape, as if trying to make the alligator jump for the shot. Nearby visitors could be heard reacting, but he leaned even farther over the railing. The alligator launched vertically out of the water. The strike was explosive, jaws driving upward toward the bait and the arm in the same motion. Its jaws locked across his extended arm just above the wrist, The force shifted his balance forward instantly. The railing gave no leverage. His feet slipped on the damp planking as his upper body pitched over the side. I keep coming back to the moment the water started moving, and he treated it like part of the performance instead of the warning it was. He wasn't just near the animal anymore. He was actively provoking it for the camera. He went into the water while the alligator held its grip. Submerged, the animal immediately began the death roll, a violent, continuous rotation generating enough torque to tear limb from joint, regardless of resistance. The water at the surface churned and went dark within seconds. Bystanders on the dock retreated back along the platform. Some were calling emergency services. Others were still recording from a distance. Grixen did not surface. Footage from the incident was kept away from the public. Park staff responded after emergency calls from multiple visitors. Investigators confirmed a fatal alligator attack at the dock edge, directly linked to the deliberate baiting behavior. Injuries were consistent with a bite and a sustained death roll beneath the surface.